Figuring it out on the spot, live.
As you think, like, the fact that you can, like, picture a fractal, you know, like, just picture a square going into a square, and keep zooming in on that. Like, that's your nervous system firing along basically what amounts to a Mobius strip to create that vision in your head.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've got this ability to have these infinity loops in your nervous system up there in the brain. And so that's all done by fascia. Like, what determines if you're going to go on another Mobius strip or whatever is if the synapse is touching. And so you actually move those, you know, picture all the folds and stuff in your brain. That stuff is actually moving. And that alters how all the neural activity resonates through all these sort of Mobius strips of the synapses up there. And that's how you think different thoughts and do different things. And so that's why it takes some time to learn, is because you're actually learning how to move physical. You're kind of juggling and tossing these resonant patterns back and forth between different processing centers to create speech and language and stuff like that. And it's a physical movement. So our thinking is done by our fascia sort of contracting and wiggling and connecting various centers and lobes and stuff together. And the faster that we can do that, the faster we can think. And this has always been like one of my sort of skills that I didn't know it. Like, I can feel myself thinking, and it feels very physical to me. I literally can see myself sort of jumping and moving between stones and like lifting or holding patterns, and like when I'm ungrounded and stuff like that. And I can see it in other people too, and kind of tell if they're you can tell if somebody's using a logical fallacy because their mental body mechanics are off. And like, so if you poke it, they sort of like break, and you can kind of feel it if you're sensitive.
Yeah. And I like where you're coming from with a lot of this stuff, and it is making sense for me the more we talk about it. And again, if people have questions in the live chat, do not hesitate to send a private message to Paradigm Shift Radio through the live chat, and we'll get those to be able to help clarify. One thing I was going to mention, a lot of people sort of forget this, that like the brain itself, you could like unfold that to like the size of like a pizza or bigger, like a table napkin sort of thing, and then it's like strategically like squished up in a similar way that he's talking about with like the strips like being like right next to each other without actually having to be like one in the same thing, so that you have like more area. And then that just creates like so much room for all this processing to take place. I mean, Kurt, like I want you to be able to tell us like whether does that add in?
That's sort of it. I mean, we can actually diverge into here for a second and get
go for it.
Paint a brief picture of how thinking and perception works, like how we generate objects.
Yeah, because that's what I was interested in. Even when you just mentioned like the idea of, I mean, for anybody listening to this right now, just try doing that. Like, imagine yourself moving your right hand, like opening and closing it without moving your right hand. And I mean, people have sort of seen those studies where like if the mind imagines something, it's still like the same. It shows up the same in the brain, sort of thing. Or maybe, I don't know, Kurt, is that what it's, but yeah, just go ahead. I mean, don't just answer me, but.
Okay, so, well, basically, like, to experience an object, right? So when you want to open your crown chakra or basically sort of experience a less thought state or a less self state, you can literally sort of put this is why it's cool, because I can point your mind so much, but like you sit on the cushion every day and just chill out there and just kind of, you don't want to visualize or imagine because that adds to the noise, but you just kind of want to generate a feeling of like literally your mind opening. Like, that will actually, is what I think is happening is that the folds in your brain actually sort of like relax and kind of fall apart, and that stops them from resonating. And so basically the way that you perceive an object is that you can't ever see something the first time you see it, basically. And until you understand something, you can't see it very well, because you're dealing with this huge amount of electrical activity in your body, and you're conscious of all of it, right? So you have to make things stand out. And you do that by some part of you, I don't know where, it can like see something, and then that perception and that sight and that sound and that taste of that object come in, and they start just bouncing back through all this electrical activity forever. They change the shape of the tissue, and that pattern is just sort of in there, bouncing around. And then if that pattern comes in again, especially soon afterward, because the pattern gets weaker and more diffuse the longer it's in there. But if you see an object and then you see an object again, that object actually sort of collides with itself. And when that happens, I think there is a simultaneous there's a resonance and an interference around that object. And so there's an interference pattern that causes that object to seem separate, and then there's a resonance pattern sort of near the middle of it that causes the object to seem brighter, and then it comes into your perception. And so once you've caught that thing, or actually I think when that comes into your perception, you learn that pattern. And then when you learn to think, which is recreating these patterns for yourself, right, with the original sin or whatever, trying to do this yourself, when you think, like you've experienced a perception of, say, like a dog or whatever, when you think the perception of dog, it makes that pattern more solid, and it does that by interfering with the actual dog. So you get a black spot where there would be life. So you can use the thought to make the pattern stick out better, and that's how you sort of track objects. You're thinking, you're literally, as if somebody's running across a football field, you're actually, as you recognize it and say the object person, the concept of person, you're sending out that's pinging off of the person, and it makes them stand out more, not by illuminating their true nature, but it makes them stand out more by interfering with it, because you're sending out sort of the anti-code. So that's the meditation allows more of the actual thing to come in. And then when you start thinking about it to sort of recall it or make it more clear, you're actually sending out the anti-code to it, which dampens it.
Interesting.
Does that fall on that?
Yeah, no, that's kind of a paradigm shifting idea just there in itself. Like, I'm just thinking of the idea of just like looking at